Hey everyone, welcome to the lecture Lichenous Networks. I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, by Taeyoon Choi. Yeah, I'm going to introduce Taeyoon because he wanted me to actually clarify why we invited him, and I thought this is an interesting question because I think we have a voting process where everybody just suggests someone and we vote on them. And I invited him because I'm sort of had come across his work sort of at various places online, but had never really found the time to fully engage with it. But it kept popping up everywhere, and sometimes even unknowingly, I was reading his writing or taking in something else. In particular, the distributed network, the distributed web of care was something that introduced me to a lot of new concepts about computing and what it means to take care of something. And I sort of knew roughly what Taeyoon's work is about, sort of as it's also described on his website, that Taeyoon Choi is an artist who works with drawing, painting, computer programming, performance art, and video, and that he's based in Seoul, which happened quite recently, I think. And he also, what I knew is that he was a co-founder of the School for Poetic Computation, which I thought is also interesting to invite him here to Yale, because I guess he knows what it means to become an institution, and I guess the way he set the School for Poetic Computation up with his peers is quite different from how Yale works. So
thank you so much, Paul. And you could hear me, right? Right. So yeah, thanks, Paul. And he, along with Chisung, designed an amazing poster, which I assume you might have seen already. And just thank you so much for that. That was like such a great way for me to think about this talk. And also thanks, David, John Walker, for turning on your camera. I really love seeing you, and like I think if y'all could turn on your camera, like I'll appreciate it. And I also love that space that you guys have. Like I know that exact room that you're sitting in. Been there many times actually, and I like the energy there. Yeah, nice to see all folks. And just a shout out to my dear friends who were former students, and some of them are current faculty, and some of them are in this room, like Yeju and Laurel and Mindy. And, you know, these are just like people who I adore very much and who I feel very much inspired by. And through their work and through our friendship, I think I'm connecting with you. So I feel really honored to be invited, especially by the nomination of the students. I just think that like that's the best way to be invited. And also like I think I've been to Yale a few times, maybe 10 years ago, and mostly I remember just going to the noodle shop or the dumpling shop next to the graphic design department. Just like really cold nights when we were just, you know, we were incredibly kind of hungry and malnourished and just eating up all the dumplings that I could find. So that's mostly what I remember from my friends who were there. But I'm in Seoul now, actually in Gimpo, which is in the outskirts. It's about an hour from Seoul. And I'm continuing my practice. Today, I'm very happy to share my latest project with an amazing group of collaborators. So I'll be talking about the relationship with technology and science and environment. My previous work has much more to do with the human relationships, the community, and social conditions. But a few things have happened in my life over the last 5 years that really changed how I think about our body, our identity in relationship to nature and the world at large. The project is called Garden.local. And I'll come back to these credits in a minute and also highlight them when their contributions are showcased on my presentation. But it's really a group effort with more than a dozen collaborators across South Korea and the US. Yeah, I'm really interested in creatures, idea of small things that are perhaps not so visible to us. Not visible because it's small, but also because we don't take them quite seriously, like a moss or a mushroom or lichens, which are various types of small living and non-living things that surround our habitat. I'm going to be focusing particularly on the lichens because I think they're just such a fabulous collaboration between a living thing and a non-living thing. By that, I mean, it's a mix of algae and a fungi. And fungi is technically not a living thing. It exists in its own particular way. It's not like a green tree or, kind of a plant that we see. And its interdependent relationship between these two entities seem to be extremely powerful and essential. And they have a lot to teach us today in 2021 when we are confronted with so many challenges on a personal level, but also societal level. So that idea of interdependence between two very different entities that are cohabitating and mutually supporting each other is very empowering. Here's an animation of a mushroom, a fungi that is growing within certain parameters. And I'll be playing some music that my friends created. And here are the lichens. And here are the moss. there are three types of creatures that I've been creating with my collaborators, which are kind of the digital organisms. And to get to the story of this, let's focus on a couple of details. I like to think about software as plants, something that lives independent of us, the humans, and they have their own stories and they have their own pace of life. And I like to think about computer hardware as a thing, like the thing that's at the core of the earth that has a big magnetic field and a powerful dirt around them, which carries the life around us. I like to think about data as the creature, which sometimes we know and sometimes we don't. And this type of thinking is based on my theory that I've been working on for a while, probably 15, 20 years of thinking about computer and technology as artistic and cultural medium. And specifically the idea of computation, like coding and automation, which are related but different. I'm much more interested in the metaphor of how we can think about technology through artistic and literary metaphors. So, if we look at the earth, at the very center of the earth, there's the thing, the core. And I'd like to think about that like the one in the binary computation. And at the top levels of the computation, there's the abstraction, which is the nothing. Or sometimes it seems like it's nothing. So the real complexity and beauty happens between the nothing and the thing, between 0 and 1. We created a wall graphic that people were able to walk through the different layers of abstraction and experience computing on a more of an illustrative way. And here's a technical stack that was made into a drawing about a slice of an earth. At the very end, you see the metaphor of the rigidity and then plasticity. And these are two different types of characters of things that we find on the earth, and also the living things, but also in the computers. The idea of the plastic is that you can give and receive form, like the idea of a plasticity as an incredibly powerful approach to thinking about objects. Idea that it's not a static thing, but it can morph and you can shape it. And I bring that to more of an artistic and political idea that we are never a solid thing. We are always changing. We need to believe that we can change and other people can change as well. And to bring that to a technology is to question this common sense, the idea that tech and code is just very cold and machine-like things. Actually, all the computers that we're using now, such as the one that I'm using for this conference call, it came from the earth. It's a rare earth mineral, like a rock that's tricked into thinking. I think that's really important thing to remember. Even with all these complex and high-performing computers, the material reality of the computers are not going to change. Here's a large-scale drawing of the same diagram. So what do I do with that? In the past, I've made computers by wiring electricity with transistors. I've made performances with strings to have a performative approach to thinking about the internet, and also coding and writing projects. In this project, I was really interested in bringing the physicality with the digital and virtual environments that we could create. With Donghun, who is a kind of a jack of all trade type of engineer and a friend. We've been thinking about different ways of communication, and the primary material that we are using is actually a mesh network, a Wi-Fi network that is meshed, which is a kind of a decentralized model where there's no one single node, but there are multiple nodes that are overlapping. So even if one node fails, rest of the network would maintain. So there's a mesh network, and there's another type of network that is called LoRa, which is a radio frequency network. In this video, I'm soldering a LoRa board that's connected to the humidity and temperature sensor. The advantage of the LoRa sensor is that you could have a very long range communication, such as 5 to 20 miles. I think it goes pretty far. This is not necessarily a mesh network, but a peer-to-peer network that is independent from other wireless network or commercial carrier. So here's the board to get the temperature and humidity data. And when they're soldered together, I put it in a water protective enclosure. And we had it connected to a solar panel so that it could broadcast the signal. So just a one note for the graphic designers in the room, making circuit board is very similar to silkscreen project. It's actually really fun to think about electricity as a print, and also the electrical circuit as a limited edition print that you could create different variations and unique artworks. So we installed a sensor outside of the museum in Paju, about an hour and a half from Seoul. The data from the sensor was transmitting the real-time information about the environment to the server inside of the museum. Before we get to the details of the technology, I do want to share some process of creating animation for the creatures. I made the initial drawings by hand, and I was communicating with these two wonderful developers/designers to come up with a design system. Here is a wacky system that we did not use, but I liked it very much. And you get to see the creatures interacting in the environment, which we are calling a garden, like a virtual garden. And the system and prototype, and we didn't really understand, we wanted the relationship between the creatures and then the gardens. And we began to realize that we wanted the background and the creature to have some type of a relationship that is about coexistence and interdependence. So each group represents a unique visitor, like for accessing the garden with smartphones, iPads, or laptops. And they're actually accessing a tiny computer called a Raspberry Pi, which is serving as a local server. And we wanted the creatures to travel from one garden from another. Like if you have a piece of land and butterfly comes to your garden, and also your neighbor's garden. This is how we installed it in the museum. We had multiple things happening here, but most importantly for you, we had a one computer that was accessing one of the gardens and alternating between a focused view and a more of a macro view to show the gardens and their relationship. This garden had the mushroom, moss, and lichen. And in the version that we showed, the users or the visitors could type in their names and they would display alongside the creature. So that was a kind of a joy of finding your own creature among other digital creatures. Here's my mom and auntie playing with the artwork. This was really interesting and difficult. Like technically it was difficult because we were using other people's smartphones in a way that they don't normally use. And it was an entirely local network that is physically built into the hardware. And oftentimes the elderly folks didn't know how to use their own smartphones browsers. All in all, that was about exploring the digital environment that we are co-creating. These iPads are showing 3 different types of gardens. And they're slightly different. The background shapes are different. The mushroom garden's shape is round. And they respond to the touch in a primitive ways. I'm a visual artist. I mess around with tech and other material. But I consider myself a visual artist, a drawing and painting person first and foremost. I'm really interested in what is possible with physical material, what is possible with digital material. I've been working with a really fantastic screen printing collective called SAA in Korea. I designed these computer-generated patterns and asked them to print it. And I think people who have done silk screen printing know that this kind of a gradation is very difficult. It's actually not using a mesh screen. It's actually done all by hand. They have a really good craftsmanship, and we really liked pushing each other about what is possible with print and also possible with code. These panels are combined. There are 36 of them, and they create unique combinations. which are like the moss and lichen and fungi. And the Raspberry Pi servers are actually attached to the painting. So the painting itself is like a giant server. The music was created by my friends Y2K92, who are a kind of a house and electronic music duo in Seoul. And these are the engineers and designers, producers that I worked with. Cesar Mokan, who is a friend of some of you, because he's based in New York. This is the first time for me to work with a large team in Korea. I relocated here last year after 15 years of New York. I was really fascinated by the thinking about building a practice here to make it more sustainable. Because if you're planning to live in New York, good luck. It's not very sustainable in all manners. I think it's an incredible city and I dearly miss it. It's just such a difficult place. So I've been thinking a lot about building a network of collaborators and team and and to compensate them well and to give them the proper credit to build an ecosystem of practice. Just a couple of things that I wish I could explain more, and also like to build better for the next time, is the alt text and accessibility feature for the blind and visually impaired folks. I'm inspired by my friend Shannon Finnegan, who's a graphic designer and artist and a disability advocate who's been doing a really incredible work about like alt text as poetry. Alt text is usually just a technical description of a visual, but she really asks like, it could be really beautiful if blind people experience the concept, the beauty, and the joy more than just a visual description. So we work with a poet in Korea, Chaejong, who I asked to interpret the visuals into poem. And she wrote a really beautiful ghostly description of what's happening. And if you're a blind person, the machine reader would kind of read these poems. Another thing is a sign language and accessibility features. So I work with disabled people for some time. And as a visual artist and a designer, we often overlook the importance of people who don't see or people who experience things differently. And also like people who have different access needs. So providing Korean Sign Language interpretation of the work as a form of music video so that people who can't hear the sound or my voice could actually experience the work in other ways. It was also important that it looks cool, and this is the accessibility is not added on as a clinical addition to the work. So we hired a fashion designer, and we had a whole set of crew, and that was quite amazing. So just to wrap up, these are some of the people who helped me take on the creative ownership of the project together. I'm really interested in the idea of a stewardship, the idea like maybe I cannot make artwork forever. So maybe I should give up and then let other people to take the leadership of this project. Maybe that's better. And I'm really interested in challenging this conventional notion of ownership and authority. I'm going to be leading this project for the foreseeable future, but eventually it will be like running a small server, like a small computer. And I want to distribute it around the world among collectors and stewards of the project who could maintain the project, keeping it like a library of social creatures. If you're interested in participating and being a part of this, just let me know. I'm approachable by emails and social media. And yeah, that's it.